So in our second part, we're going to talk about the fact that good pedagogy is always good. That no matter whether you're talking in English, you're teaching in Chinese, whatever it is that you're teaching, good pedagogy is always good. Let me give an example, an illustration from the term reduce, reuse, recycle. You may be familiar with American Thanksgiving, which is on the fourth Thursday of November, which is coming up just a couple weeks. And it's a time where we have too much food, like Chinese New Year. But we don't want to waste it. So we keep reusing that same food in different ways. And so likewise, if you are doing EMI, you don't have to start all over again. There are many principles that you can reduce, reuse, recycle your best practices from Chinese in your teaching. Reduce. Don't try to do too much at one time. Reuse. Don't waste good stuff. Recycle. Don't throw out the gold. Let me give you some examples. Don't make too much. If this is your first time doing EMI, don't expect it to be perfect. Don't try to do 5 classes of EMI all at once. Don't expect to be able to do it as well as someone who has done it for 5 years or 10 years or however long. You can't do it. You can start with someone else's basic ideas, but you have to develop it yourself. So don't try too much at one time. Don't make too much too late. If you're making a Thanksgiving feast, you plan a whole week ahead of time. You start preparing things. If you're doing an EMI class, you're going to have to start early. You're going to have to get your materials early. You're going to have to think how you translate the materials from Chinese to English, how you express things in one or the other. Do you have to change the order? Do you have to change whatever? It's a lot of work to prepare any new course. An EMI course, even if it's the same topic, is a new course. And you need time to prepare. Don't wait. Start now for next fall. Don't serve too much at once. Reduce. Okay? In Thanksgiving dinner or any dinner, you normally have like 1 cup of starch, 1 cup of rice, a bowl of rice. But in a Thanksgiving feast, you have stuffing, you have potatoes, sweet potatoes, corn, rolls. You don't need a cup of each. If you have a cup of each one, it's too much. You're overstuffed. Similarly, in an EMI course, you have content. But you also have English. And these days, you may also have technology. Each of those takes cognitive load. Each of those takes time, takes effort. And if you try to put all of that into one, a full amount, your students will die. And so will you. Okay? Cognitive load. Think about how much total material they are dealing with. Okay? So if you have only content taught in Chinese to Chinese students, you can have a big thing, a big load of content. But if you have Chinese or English and content and technology and whatever, each one needs to be smaller. Okay, what about reuse? Some things are good as they are. We can take pumpkin pie and serve it the next day. It's fine. Maybe reheat it, maybe add some topping, but it's only good for a limited time. Okay? Similarly, if you have good textbooks, if you have good course structure from a Chinese course, an equivalent course, if you have good assignments, you may be able to reuse those with very little change. You may need to change or add. After Thanksgiving, we'll take the turkey, the stuffing, the vegetables, and make what we call a casserole. You don't have casseroles here. Or make a sandwich. You add a little bit of extra stuff, you have a sandwich. In the same way, you may be able to take different ideas that you've used before and combine them and come up with something that's very good, very nutritious, just by adding new stuff. This whole idea, many of the ideas that we are sharing today are reused because we found they work. We found that they're useful, they're healthy. And so a lot of our materials, it's not exactly the same though. We never use exactly the same. We take bits and pieces from here, from there. You can do the same with your teaching. And then as far as recycling, don't throw out the fat. When you cook a turkey, the fat cooks out and you make gravy with that. And the gravy adds flavor to either that meal or later meals. Similarly, the fat is richness, okay? And there are many rich ideas that are present in your teaching that may be lost in another language, and you don't want to lose them. You want to change them and add them back in a way that works. On the other hand, some ideas may become easier to understand in another language, or bring out a different degree of richness.
Rich ideas may be lost in another language. Yesterday at our dinner time, Professor Lin, who is the third speaker, I don't think he's here, right? Professor Lin said, "I am Alexander. My name is Alexander." And we'll say, "What are you talking about?" Then he said, 压力山大. 压力山大. Then everybody was laughing, but Jerry was there, what are you talking about? That's exactly this. Some ideas may become clearer, more available in one language than the other.
So again, just like reusing the bones and extracting the essence rather than throwing it out. There's good stuff in other classes, good things you have learned in other classes. Don't waste it. That's the essence of good teaching. And again, don't throw out good food. We tend, after a big meal, I'm full, and then that material is wasted. And so again, don't put too much on your plate at one time. Start with one EMI course and then gradually build, because if you try too much and then it just wasted, why did I go through all that effort? And you don't feel like doing it again because of that wasted effort. So reduce, reuse, recycle. Reduce the scope of your teaching. Reduce the details and reduce your procrastination in getting started on preparing. Reuse good materials, your textbook, your syllabus, your assignments, and recycle the inspiration, the framework, the essence that's really the heart of the teaching, the real good stuff. Keep that. Okay, so again, in summary for this first part, use the ideas that have worked. The good ideas, good teaching is good no matter what language you're teaching in. And so make sure that you focus on clear goals, clear learning objectives, reuse materials with or without modification, and think about what is the true essence. What exactly do you want your students to learn?
Especially the reduce part. Sometimes as a teacher, we're worried we cannot cover all the materials. You know, our responsibility is to cover from chapter to chapter, from end to end. I sometimes have that problem. That's why I always need a TA to trim, to reduce my PPT.
You should have seen how long this was when she gave me her part. When you gave me your part of this PPT to incorporate together?
Yes, this PPT used to be over 200, 300 pages. Then I submit it to him, say, please reduce. Reduce.
Let's move on. Okay, stakeholders. There are a number of people that you need to get on your side in doing this. It's not just you. It's you as the teacher, but it's also your TAs. They have to know what your purpose is. And your students have to buy in as well. You have to get them on your side from the very beginning.
This addresses the question our professor from math department asked. How do we ask the students to agree with the goal of the class? That actually has to be done constantly. Every time we meet together in an EMI, we have to remind them why we are together, suffering together. What's the purpose? What's the goal? Right? We could have done it easily in one way. Why do we choose a harder path to travel? That's why we need a student's agreement. We need to agree together as a team. We are working together for a different goal. So what's that goal?
And here again, this is where students have to be the focus. What we call, and what is called in education these days, student-centered learning. What does that mean? It means, number one, it's not teacher-centered. You are not the expert and you decide what they need to learn. Okay? But it's also not student-led. They don't know where they're going. How can they lead? So instead, it has to be teacher-directed. You have to give direction, but it has to be geared toward meeting their needs, both current needs and future needs. So that means that you need to involve your TAs. The TAs have to be part of the teaching team. Again, both of us in our classes emphasize teamwork. We are all in this together. And so just like a team, you don't have one leader that says, okay, now you do this, if you're playing volleyball. And one person says, okay, it's your turn to hit the ball. Oh, now it's your turn to hit the ball. No, each person knows where they have to move in order to be in position at the right time. They've been trained, they work together, and each one is contributing to the success of the class. The students have to be active. Okay? There's a difference between audience and supporters. Audience is just sitting there listening. Supporters are like the fans. If you're on a sports team, you want the home field advantage. Why? Because the fans are, go, go, go. You want your students to be fans, to be part of the action. When you win, the team wins, they all win. And you have to try to build that relationship into your class from the very beginning. And if the team loses, They're heartbroken because they have lost. It's not that you lost, but they have lost. So you have to, how do you build that in?
So every morning or every afternoon when I come to my class, and whether it's EMI or CMI, I have to build teamwork, the spirit. Let everybody be involved. This is a critical moment in our life. We are here on the same boat, trying to move to a very important direction. So let me talk about my background in my field, and which will encourage you to know why you are qualified as an EMI instructor. 2008 to 2010, I was a professor at Wheaton College. My program is called TESOL and Intercultural Studies. In other words, who were my students? They were native speakers of English who are going everywhere to teach English internationally. What was I hired to do? I was there to teach them phonology, sound structure in English, and grammar, English grammar. I need stronger heart to stand in the classroom facing my students, all are native speakers of English who know English, but not English structure and English phonology. In other words, I'm not there to compete with them who speaks proficient, better English, but I was there because I have expertise. I have expertise, just like all of you have expertise. That's why you can stand there to tell them what to do, what not to do. So that was very important, but that was hard because at the very beginning, I thought I was so practical because, as an applied linguist, who can be more practical than an applied linguist? But the teacher said, don't give me all the theories. Tell me on Monday morning, what am I supposed to do to face a group of students? How should I teach? How do I teach them? I was thinking, in Taiwan, we never have to tell our students what to do. Just give you all the theories. You are smart enough to think about how to apply all the theories into day-to-day, mundane, detailed, minor routines. It's none of my business, it's your business.
In other words, that's teacher-directed, or teacher-centered, that the teacher is the expert, and if you're good enough students, you'll figure it out. But what they wanted was something that was student-centered, that the teacher is there to help as a facilitator, to help them, and if you're a good teacher, the students will understand.
So I learned to talk about the main points at the very beginning because we have a tendency to talk about all the details and then come to a conclusion. But they want to use the thesis statement. What's the main point? Tell me 1, 2, 3, the 3 points, and then talk about the details. So they say, tell me what to do on Monday morning. Tell me all the main points. Don't wait for 2 weeks before you tell me what you are teaching about. So I was challenged by these students, not because of English proficiency, but because the way, it's different culture, the way we interacted with students. So from the beginning, they said, we don't want this teacher. I was thinking, how dare you? I have had 16 years of good experience in Taiwan. I'm here to teach you guys. You should be more appreciative. How dare you say you don't want this teacher? And then, after 6 months of hard work, suffering, and finally look at where I am seated in relation to them. I'm in the C position. center position, surrounded by my students. After 2 years, they finally, they accept me as their teacher because I can overcome the hurdles. I'm willing to change my way of doing things to meet their needs. But remember, we have expertise. That's something we need to keep in mind. So we have confidence. And I am actually, my background is Austronesian linguistics. My work is on Taiwanese indigenous languages. As an applied linguist, I do 3 things: writing grammar, compiling dictionary, producing textbooks in teaching, language teaching. That's my work. But not in English, but in Austronesian languages. So as an EMI instructor, we need to come out. As an EMI instructor, are we a vegetable or a fruit?
Well, in America, they consider tomatoes to be a vegetable because it's normally eaten salty in a sauce or cooked in some way. Here, it's a fruit.
Or both.
Or both.
So these are the courses, EMI courses, I usually teach as a linguist in my graduate program. And how do I teach? And this is the undergraduate EMI courses I usually teach. As an Austronesian linguist, I also teach Indonesian and also Filipino. That's part of my training too. But as an applied linguist, I am interested demystifying courtroom conversations. You can see I love the word demystifying.
Okay, so my background is very different. When I came to Taiwan, we both got our degrees, our PhDs from Cornell University, and we were looking different places. But for 2 PhDs to get a job in the same place at the same time is not easy. So basically we said, okay, whoever gets the offer first will go. And she got the offer first, so we came to Taiwan. And at that point, we had, 3 young kids and 1 born 2 months after we got here. And so I said, I'll take care of the kids for a while. Now, remember, this is 30 years ago in Taiwan. Most of you aren't even 30 years old yet, or a lot of you. But 30 years ago in Taiwan, fathers did not take care of kids. And so, I always got the question, hey, when are you going to get a job? So, I have a job. I'm taking care of 4 kids. Isn't that enough? No, I mean a real job. Well, 2 years after moving to Taiwan, I was invited to teach at the American School in Taichung, which is an American school, but 80 or 90% of the students are from Taiwan and were ESL. Most of them came to the school in middle school, which means by the time I got them in high school, they had been learning English for about 2 years. This was before English was part of the curriculum in Taiwan. And so from that time, basically, I have been teaching EMI because I was teaching science in English to people who were second language speakers. And so it's not called EMI, it's not prototypical EMI, but it was nonetheless. And so while I was there, I taught science, taught biology, but then I was also doing academic editing papers for professors from Taiwan. And so then that led to my current job of teaching engineering writing. And when I got to teaching engineering writing, I found there's no textbook. There are a lot of textbooks for teaching scientific writing, and I told my students, all of your articles are IMRD. Look for it. Introduction, methods, results, discussion. And they looked and they said, Professor Rau, it's not there. And I said, of course it is. Not. And so I had to do my own research and write my own textbook about engineering writing because there wasn't anything at that time. And so now I'm teaching engineering writing, technical writing, teaching graduate students basically to write research articles in English. The English technical writing for master's students, the advanced for PhD students. And again, as I mentioned before, it's not prototypical EMI, it's EAP according to the linguists, but the engineering school considers it EMI, so whatever. Okay, so as a teacher, you need to remember your goal. The goal is that students learn. The goal is not that you teach, the goal is that students learn. It's not what should I teach, but what should my students be able to do when they finish this course. The goal is what they learn. And so you need to make sure that they understand using multiple modalities, again, as we mentioned before.
You can see that I like to use gestures so much. That's because of my background. When I was young, I did dubbing, 配音 for cartoon. That's why, sometimes I have all kinds of gestures. Yeah, and I dubbed for Felix the cat.
Okay, so multiple modalities includes verbal. When you are speaking, when I begin talking in English, the first class for my graduate students, I slow way down. And I talk very slowly and very clearly. And then gradually, as the semester goes on, I get a little faster and a little faster. And because they have learned, they're able to keep up. But I specifically speak, I enunciate very clearly, which is very hard with masks. But I use gestures, I use pointing, I use pictures, PowerPoints. All of those are helpful for students in any language, but particularly when you're working in a second language.
Remember, we talk about our teamwork. There are 3 stakeholders: the professors, the TAs, and the students. Not to mention the parents of the students. But let's talk about our TA.
So the TA, some people think the TA is a servant. They come in, they set up the projector, they unlock the room, they provide batteries when the remote control fails. They're a servant, and you're the master. But we prefer a relationship like a co-pilot. Okay? What does a co-pilot do? A co-pilot does not fly the plane. They could in an emergency, but while the pilot is flying, they're checking this checklist. Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? They're flipping switches. They're taking care of all of those details so the pilot can focus on speed and direction. So you as a teacher are focusing on speed and direction, making sure the plane is getting there. But your co-pilot is doing a lot of the technical stuff behind the scenes, a lot of the other things that let you focus on the goal. So in looking for a TA, we have different needs because of our different classes. And so Victoria, being a energizer and taskmaster, is very creative, but she needs someone to organize. And as she said, cut her PowerPoints.
Yes, reduce and reduce.
I'm very organized, but sometimes in my classes I have very low-level students, and I need a translator. So what do your TAs, for your class, what do you need?
What do I need?
You also need to consider who's available. So we'll talk about each of these for our particular situations.
So for example, when I taught applied linguistics, I happened to have a graduate student from Vietnam who speaks very good English. So that's a perfect TA for my graduate school, applied linguistics and social linguistics. He can serve as a good model for the students too. And when I teach Austronesian linguistics, I need students from the Philippines who can speak Tagalog to serve as my TAs. And when I do Austronesian language documentation, I need a TA who is an analyzer and who is good at computer science. And her job was as a co-pilot so that I could concentrate on my work, and she did all the rest. And I also had a student from Nicaragua who wanted to have internship. So he asked me if he could serve as my TA. I say, okay, then you are my trainee. You are my trainee. So in this case, his task was a little different. He was there to learn how to teach. And I also took the opportunity when we had so many international students coming to CCU. We have Indonesian students. I recruited them to serve as my TAs and to make MOOC, M-O-O-C, Massive Open Online Course. MOOC, massive, yeah. So, you know, all these TAs have to be able to perform with a good smile, you know, friendly, entertaining, attractive. So these are my Indonesian TAs. And we also use a classroom which is called TEO classroom, Technology Enhanced Active Learning, so that the students, when they study Indonesian, they also use technology to make, for example, chatbot, to talk to an Indonesian chatbot. Or they use CoSpaces to make their virtual VR, virtual reality stories. I always incorporate all those technology skills into my second language teaching, but with TAs addressing their language needs.
Okay. On the other hand, in my situation, again with writing, it's hard to find TAs that are both proficient in English, proficient in engineering, and able to communicate with students. But what I really need are people to do that one-to-one assistance. And so the most useful people to me are those who have taken my class. Because my class, they have learned how to do each of these steps. The assignments are pretty similar from one semester to another. And so they can say, oh yeah, this is what he's looking for. This is what you need to find in this article. This is what you need to write. This is how you can succeed. Okay, so that's the most important for me. Sometimes I have people that really should not be in an EMI course. Their English level is too low. And in that case, yes, I can speak Chinese, but it's a lot better if somebody else can help. Unfortunately, there's no way to predict that when you're choosing your TA. And in my situation, I'm limited because I, as an adjunct professor, don't have students myself. I don't have graduate students. The professors who have graduate students say, you are going to TA my class. And then when I look for TAs, there's nobody left. So it's, but that means that all of the TAs that I have gotten, most of them have been there because they really got something out of the class. They really liked it and they want to learn more. And so it's been very good. I've had several TAs that have stayed with me for 2 or 3 years. But those that have stayed with me for 2 or 3 years have done other things. One of them said, hey, can I make some PowerPoints for you and share some of the ideas in different ways? Yeah, sure. And so now I use some of his ideas in terms of talking about how to join a community. He used the example from Star Wars to show how you join an academic community and many other things. That novel ways of presenting things that I had not thought of.
And when I hire a TA, I also have other goals. I want them to win Best TAs Award. I always have that in mind. So let me show you what they usually did in my class. My TAs helped me in undergraduate general education class. They role played at the beginning of the class just to make it, entertaining and attract people's attention. And they also walk around to help group discussion. And once in a while, they have to demonstrate their own research to the students. Because even in undergraduate courses, our students have to write group projects in English, or sometimes reflection in English. So our TAs have to correct their English and share how she or he wrote in English. And like I said, my TA helped me reduce my PPTs. But it depends. Sometimes I need a TA who's an energizer. When I start to talk about something, I lost track of what I'm talking about. I say, what did I say? I just said, okay. And my TA needs to quickly continue.
But your TA in this case is looking at her phone, so she...
Right. So if I had an energizer TA, that's what I usually do. Yeah. Okay, and I also, the other thing as an EMI teacher, we need to correct students' English reports. How much do you correct? How much to say, these are repeated problems, give a comment and you fix it on your own. Or you have to correct every single detail. You have to make a decision and stick to it. And I always like to make student awards at the end. Those titles are very creative. And once in a while, I invited speakers. 远来的和尚会念经. So when we have invited speakers, students sometimes, this is a new speaker. They feel motivated. So co-teaching is a good idea. Once in a while, you invite another professor to join you. Let me share with you this comment. About 10 years ago, when I taught an EMI class at CCU, one of the students from economics left a comment. He said, Jerry, can you read this? He read.
Yeah, basically he said that when there was a non-Chinese speaker there, the professor would talk in English, but as soon as that person was out of the class, he said, we can go back to Chinese. And in this class, he was pleasantly surprised that for the entire semester, the entire course of language and culture was taught using only English, with plenty of discussion among ourselves.
That was 10 years ago. A student who commented that oh, this is real. You are doing something real. So I hope this will encourage all of us to do it real. That's why they join your EMI class.
They want to learn English. They want to practice English and learn English at the same time as the content. Yes, it's easier for you and them to switch back into Chinese, but they lose in that process. They don't gain as much.
Remember, when I code switch, I usually use an expression, an idiom, something that I think it will add to my communication with you. It's not just direct translation.
So how do you motivate students? At the beginning of every class, I tell my students that they are to be active learners. Number one, that means they need to be prepared. They need to read the textbook before class. They need to be there on time. How many of your students come in 10 or 15 minutes late? From the very first day I say, I want you here on time. And I start on time. And after a couple of weeks, they get the idea that if they're not there, they miss something. I want them to ask questions. From the very first day, I tell them this, that they provide feedback to one another. We are working as a team. We're not competing to find the best writer. We are working to help make sure that everyone succeeds. And submit assignments on time. And again, that's for my sake, because of my schedule, in order to make sure that I can have time to give them good feedback before class the next time. So what's the student role? I asked them if they're familiar with the term GIGO. Apparently we have some computer scientists here. GIGO is garbage in, garbage out. If you have a very good computer program, statistical program, but you put bad data in, your results are trash. Okay? And I say, in this class, my motto is NINO. What do you think that is? I heard it.
Nothing in, nothing out.
Nothing in, nothing out. Okay? I have done my very best to make sure that the class is good. But if you don't put anything into it, you get nothing out of it. I tell my students that from the very first day. It's not just me, it's us. We are working together. And if you can do it. I make sure I do my part. If you do your part, you will succeed. It's hard, but you will succeed. I tell them the expectations of the class. And I say, it's like a logistic curve. A logistic curve is such that there are basically three parts. The first part is like, riding a bike and you're riding along. It's fairly easy. And it gets really hard for a while. And you're not sure you're going to make it. But then, by the last third of the course, I can do this. And you're going to get there. As long as you keep going, as long as you keep up with the assignments, you will get there. So, the first part, that's what they find. It's fairly easy, fairly manageable. And then they wonder, can I really do this? And it's during that middle third that I have to keep encouraging and saying, yes, keep going, keep going, keep going. And then by the end of the class, it's like, I did it! That's the type of attitude that you need to develop among your students. Okay, so again, we have a little bit of time for questions. We'll do the same thing we did last time. Think for 30 seconds what questions you have on this.
In your slide was Mr. Harrison and sales target. Yeah, this slide. So you said maybe we should focus on what the student, our teaching should focus on the student-centered. But for me, it's actually quite difficult to do that because Well, if I teach a lecture, for instance, I teach manufacturing of materials, I usually focus on the manufacturing method that I'm more familiar with, or the method that I think are more of importance. But that's probably not the way students think. So how do I make this balance? Yeah, I guess it really depends on the topic, but are there any ways so I can figure out that the taste or the flavor of the students?
So he teaches manufacturing, and he says he focuses on what he's familiar with. Okay, my question to you would be, is that what they are going to need to learn, or what they're going to need to apply to get a job?
Well, yes, that's what I thought.
Okay, so you are doing it. You are being student focused because you are thinking not about, I know this, but who's ever going to use it? You're thinking about, I know this and I can teach it well, and if they learn it, it will help them get a job. Okay? But again, it's a slight twist. It says, I'm not teaching this because I like it, but I'm teaching this because I think it will be useful to them. And then it's not just, I stand here to look like I know it all, but how can I help them get excited about this? How can I help them get interested in this? So they go a little bit deeper than what I'm teaching them. That's where it becomes student focused, is when I'm thinking about their long-term needs, making them lifelong learners, making it part of something they choose to integrate.
So in other words, you are doing your job. You are student-centered. Even though you are doing it, you're enjoying it, you are talking about what you know the best. This is exactly what they need to learn. That's student-centered.
Yeah. Other questions?
Thank you very much. I know it's not the end of the session yet, but I want to thank you for your perfect presentation with a collaboration with a subject teacher and language teacher. But my question is, you're talking about the stakeholders, including teachers, students, and TAs, right? But I'm just wondering, the teachers you mentioned here is including a language teacher, or in terms of what the role for language teacher in EMI course. I know EMI course basically is focused on content instead of language. But do you think language teaching has a role here?
First, let me clarify. In terms of our roles here, he is not the content teacher. I am not the language teacher. We are EMI instructors. As a team, we are doing it. We are teaching content using English as invisible resource.
And even in our courses, I mean, she's not a language teacher. She's teaching linguistics, which is not language. So if you're teaching language in a language center, again, that's not typical EMI because you're not teaching content.
But in case in EMI class, they have some reading, for example, for grade students, they might have some articles, right? Some journal articles.
Yes.
They teach them how to read.
Yes.
And then how is the language teacher can do? For example, you can analyze the article, how to reading strategies, okay, or genre analysis. I think we can do something, cooperation or help. That's what I'm thinking, because I'm from China University, in charge of language center. We are doing teacher training, but in case we are so care about students learning, nobody talking about students learning. How do they learn? How do they evaluate their results? We just teach, but how would they, if they don't learn the content and then they don't learn the language either, this lose-lose. It's nothing pedagogy to me, right?
Yeah, so again, your situation is somewhat like mine, in that it's not true EMI, it's more like EAP, English for Academic Purposes, where you are teaching the structure of the research articles, how to read the research article, where to find what material. The content is not your specialty, but you probably have to learn enough of the content to be able to help them to read it. And that's, again, what my background is not engineering. And I have students from mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, electrical engineering. I'm not a specialist in all of those. But I have learned, because I am student focused, I need to learn enough about that to be able to lead them through it. So every course is different. Every situation is different. That's why you can't just say, this is the way to teach EMI. Because every course, every situation is a little different.
I think for those of us who work in Language Center, who are supporting other content courses, we need to work harder. We need to learn, say, read engineering articles and understand engineering writing, interview engineers to find out why do they put certain structures in certain component. So we have to do extra work. I remember about 20 years ago when I worked at Providence University in the English department. I wanted to do some kind of EMI in collaboration with chemists. I went to the chemistry department. I said, can we collaborate? You serve as the content teacher. I can help with the language part. She had no interest. She didn't even want me to stay in the classroom to observe her teaching. In other words, if we want to support, we need to walk an extra mile to learn about their specialty so they feel, okay, you're qualified, come in.
As I said, I had to learn the structure of engineering articles. And in the process, I found what I believe is a fairly generalizable structure of what to expect in research articles. So if you want to talk more about research articles later, we could do that.
I'm from Language Center in NUU, and I got mission to train the TA student. But my question is that, what if my students, they just have to embrace the middle level, lower level English, and what can we do?
Okay, what can you do if your students are lower level English?
TAs.
TAs are your blessing there, because you can continue to teach in English for those that can handle that, and your TAs can help with those that need a little bit more support. That's really the best strategy. Again, that's where we are working as a team, everyone doing what they can do best.
In other words, you need to find your TA's strengths, not his weaknesses.
Okay, let's at this point take another short break, and then we'll come back for the final third part.